Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the first MLML seminar of spring 2022. To kick it off today, well, I'll start off by just reading the etiquette script for our remote seminars. First of all, audience participants will be muted throughout the seminar, so please don't attempt to turn on your video or share your screen during the talk. There will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions live at the end of the talk, just like a normal seminar. And once Andrew has finished his talk, you can use the Zoom's raise hand feature to notify me that you'd like to ask a question. And that's located under the reactions tab at the bottom of the Zoom window. And then if you do ask a question, you'll be invited to turn on your video during that portion if you wish. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker of the semester, Andrew DeVogelaere. Dr. DeVogelaere oversees the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuaries Research Program. And this includes facilitating collaboration among the many research institutions in this region and providing technical information to decision makers. And he also leads the SIMON, or Sanctuary Integrated Monitoring Network, which assesses how populations of organisms and habitats are changing through time. He originally got his bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley in biology, then came here to Moss Landing Marine Labs and received a Master's of Science, and then went on to UC for his doctorate. And he spent a lot of time doing research in the area and connecting research to marine policy and decision making. So really looking forward to his talk today. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tom. I am a graduate of Moss Landing Marine Labs. I was in the phycology lab, and I'm happy to be here with my Moss Landing Marine Labs community. And I've arranged this presentation thinking about what somebody from Moss Landing Marine Labs should know about the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. As you look out the window of your lab, you're looking out over the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but what does that really mean? So I'm going to talk about science informing management for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but I'm also going to be talking about how our program is structured and other things you need to know about it besides the science. And then I'm going to end with just a few thoughts that I have about conservation biology in general. So let's get right into it. Okay. Let's see, there we go. So the mission of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is to understand and protect the coastal ecosystem and cultural resources of the area that you can see in the boundaries here. The Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary was designated in 1992, the main area here along the coastline. And in 2008, we added this square down here over the Davidson Seamount. It is interesting how the boundary was selected. It was actually in President George Bush was going up for re-election, and he wanted to show his environmental side to help get some support in California. And most of the alternatives for the size of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary went up to Año Nuevo, or just the bay, or all the way down the Big Sur coastline. But nobody imagined that in the end it would be selected to be this large, and that's what the administration wanted. It's really the dream of Leon Panetta, who wanted to find a way, mostly to find a way to protect this area from offshore oil drilling. So that's our mission, and we're broken up into an operations team, a resource protection team, an education team, and the research team, which I lead. Okay. So we are part of a national program. You can see that there are many sites around the nation. There's a couple of proposed sites, one there at Lake Ontario, just south of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, in between Monterey and the Channel Island Sanctuary. There's a proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And you can see also there's a couple of triangles in this image, and those are national monuments. To become a national marine sanctuary, it's a long process involving, public input, government decisions, discussions with the states, and then working with Congress on the designation. But the triangles are national monuments, and they can be designated by the stroke of a pen of a president. And usually on their outgoing months, if they like to protect a certain area, they can do that. And then in offshore areas, the sanctuary often ends up managing them, these national monuments as well. So on our program operations side, some of the things relevant to Moss Landing Marine Labs is we do have some small boats. The RV Fulmar is there on the upper left. It's a 67-foot vessel, and it's been used in tandem with the John Martin in the past in some projects. Some people from Moss Landing Marine Labs have used it for certain activities, and it's there if there's a project that needs some things that it can do. It is a very stable boat and has a nice back deck to work off of. Just last year, we got a new edition of the RV Tegula. It's a 22-foot Radden. And the nice thing about the Tegula is that we don't need regular ship operators to drive it. Our research staff and other people trained in boat driving can just hop on the boat and go. And if you have some projects you want to work on with the sanctuary, that's a vessel that's an opportunity for you. We do have a dive program that has reciprocity with other dive programs around the area, and it's an active dive program working on everything from assessing impacts of slides on the Big Sur coastline to what's happening with the kelp and the sea urchins around the Monterey Bay. So another aspect of the program operations team is we do have an advisory council. You can see them there on the beach in I think it looks like Half Moon Bay, but they meet regularly and advise the sanctuary on what the concerns are from the public and different stakeholders, and then they advise us. In particular, when we're developing our management plans, they really give us a lot of input from what the broader community wants us to work on and focus on with our staff. We have representatives from business, from commercial fishing, conservation, diving, education, recreational fishing, tourism, agriculture, and research. So if there is some things that you believe that the advisory council should know about and should relay to the staff, your representatives are John Hunt, which is associated with UC Davis, and Steve Haddock, which is at Mbari. So there's our advisory council. The program operations team spends a lot of time developing our management plans, and that's what the staff is supposed to spend their time working on in between plans, which are updated every 10 years or so. I'll be talking more about our management plan later. And then the operations team also is involved with all of our facilities. And the big thing happening right now is the sanctuary office is working with CSUMB to move our main facility to their campus, and we're working on some fundraising and building opportunities with them. We have a resource protection team, and I thought the most relevant aspects of the resource protection team to people at Moss Landing Marine Labs is we do have permits that allow you to do things that are normally prohibited. There's a They're involved, the resource protection team, with specific conservation efforts. I'll give you a few examples. And then there's a conservation working group, which is a group of folks interested in conservation that get together regularly and provide, they're a working group of our advisory council that provide information to the Sanctuary Advisory Council. So our prohibitions, the main one is no exploring for oil, gas, or minerals. And for many people, like, that was enough. That the sanctuary did that. That was good enough for them. But there are also prohibitions for altering submerged lands. It's essentially disturbing the seafloor, deserting a grounded vessel, and that can happen as much as once a month. Discharging materials that injure. So when there's a sewage spill, that's a problem. There's no new dredge disposal sites within our sanctuary that are allowed. You can fish and do activities in the surface waters of the Davidson Seamount, but you can't collect there without a permit. There's no attracting of white sharks. For a while, there was groups that wanted to put people in the cages to view the sharks, and the surfers and commercial fishermen came to our advisory council and convinced the program to prohibit that activity. No disturbing or possessing mammals, turtles, and birds. That's some things we do with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and NOAA Fisheries. No removing historical resources. The map on the left is relevant, probably relevant to some people at Moss Landing Marine Labs, is that you're not allowed to fly below 1,000 feet in all of those orange areas, which is right around Moss Landing. You can see that half circle. And that includes drones. So we are working with folks at MBARI to actually study to see what the impacts of drones are. It could be that for some animals, it's not a big deal at all. For others, it is. We don't really know that. I assume that over a bird rookery, it's probably a bad idea. Maybe over a whale, they might not notice it so much. There's a lot of strong feelings out there in the public about the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. So that's some things that we're looking at. No operating of motorized personal watercraft, that's jet skis. And you can't interfere with enforcement. I don't think that's a big deal for Moss Landing, but that gives you the full list. So on the right, you can see that many people don't know that orange area of the Elkhorn Slough is also part of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and we work really closely with the Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve and the Elkhorn Slough Foundation for resource protection and research in that area. And then on the left, you can see, in our most recent management plan, we've done things like modify where these motorized personal watercraft or jet ski zones are. What might be of interest to you is that we do sometimes attach research items to our buoys. For example, at Hopkins Marine Station, they have their white shark receivers on some of our buoys. And so they're not just for letting people know where they can operate their jet skis, but they can be, it's an opportunity for placing equipment. So an example of what our resource protection team does, and it's related to science, is if you look at the map on the left there, there's, it just looks blue, but there's a lot of boundaries and zones off of our coastline. And when other agencies are developing regulations, they expect us to be the experts for our region. So a few years ago, NOAA Fisheries wanted to modify their essential fish habitat areas. Essentially, that's where they let people do bottom fishing. And what we did was we gathered all of the information that we had, science and observations in our area of the seafloor. And you can see on the right of the panel, all those dots are where images or research projects have happened. And then we also have our mapping information, which shows the brown there is where the hard bottom is. And in gathering all of the information we could, putting it on an interactive GIS. We actually shared that with the fishing community, and they were really impressed. They wanted to add some of their information, and it helped a good discussion going, suggesting where we could take off areas that were normally prohibited from trawling, and then add some areas where we didn't want trawling to happen. Not only did that add into changing the boundaries of the essential fish habitat, but we also, and that's what these big numbers are here on the right, the 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are now what we call our sanctuary ecologically significant areas, where we're trying to encourage research because we want to know more about those sites in particular. So as we switch to our education team, some things relevant to Moss Landing Marine Labs is that we do have visitor centers. There's one in Santa Cruz, there's one down in San Simeon, and they do talk about some of our research activities. Some of the scientists from Moss Landing Marine Labs have been involved in developing some of the exhibits. They are free. They're not open now because of the pandemic. But if you have a chance to go and check them out, I think you'd enjoy them. We have social media that we share with the public. The education team is always happy to talk about relevant research in the area. So if you have some things that you want to promote, something is exciting that's happened at Moss Landing Marine Labs, we can help with that. The education team works on events, things like the Whale Fest, and speakers are part of that fest, giving seminars, and we've had a number of speakers from Moss Landing Marine Labs speak at those events. And then we have volunteer programs. You can see pictures of a few of them there. The Baynet volunteers that interpret what's happening out in the wild to the public as they're walking by. You might see some of the Team Ocean groups up the slough, and they inform people about some of the regulations. It's more education than enforcement. And they interact with the public and answer questions. We have a group that measures the water quality coming down the streams after the first rain. It's called the First Flush. And your former director, Jim Harvey, he started a program with me on Beachcombers where we had citizen scientists counting all the dead birds and mammals that ended up on the beaches. And we actually would catch a couple of events, either natural or human caused, every year. So that's our active education team. And then now we get to the research program, which I head up. And one of the fantastic things about this area and the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is that we have more research institutions along our coastline, I think, than anywhere else in the world. You can see them on the left. And what we try to do is help coordinate some of the marine science. We have 5 meetings a year with representatives from many of these institutions that will talk about what's happening at their organization. They can host a presentation. We can discuss, what kinds of joint projects or joint hirings are appropriate to help complement the area. And then this group also advises the sanctuary on research issues and encourages their colleagues to work on some of the things that we need worked on. Another responsibility of the research program is to monitor the natural resources of the sanctuary area and try to detect if they're natural or human caused. We will sometimes get calls on, dead birds or something's on the beach, and information will get up to headquarters. I once got a call saying, how long are you going to let these dead birds pile up before you do something about it? And, because we had a monitoring program, we could say, well, actually, that's a normal amount, and it's not really a problem. In other cases, it is. We have to report on the condition of the sanctuary. We usually do that before each management plan, so we know what the management plan should focus on. As I mentioned in our resource protection group example project, people expect us to be regional experts on the area. So we'll work with our resource protection team, our education team, and the media when there are questions. And then there are just a bunch of public concerns that have gone through a process that said, yeah, there's some things that we should legitimately work on. In my last count of our current management plan, there are 66 research questions that we're supposed to be addressing. And that's a lot to do with a team of 5 people, which is what we have. But we do have, as you can see on the left, just a huge number of collaborators that we can work with. Tom mentioned that we do have the Sanctuary Integrated Monitoring Network, and it's right now it's largely a website. We used to fund a lot of projects, but we don't do that at the moment. There's about almost 200 monitoring programs that we track in summary in this website, and it includes for the Greater Fairlawns, Cordell Bank, and the Channel Islands have tacked onto it once we set up the website and the program. And so when we have questions, when we need to gather information to assess the health of the sanctuary, this is one of the places that we'll go. You can see at the top, we also have almost 6,000 images that we post that are available to the public. Even the aquarium uses them, and they appreciate that you can use them for free. We have information on a species database with images and natural history information. And what we're going to be building out on over the next year to 2 is what we call webinizing ecosystem trends. So as monitoring data comes in, it gets pushed out into these infographics you can see on the upper right, where you can see trends through time as data are collected. And we're working really closely with the Center for the Northern California Ocean Observing System to help serve up that information. But that's something that's pretty exciting for us right now. I did mention the condition reports that we're supposed to do before the management plans, and the way those are set up. You can see our last one was in December 2015. They provide history and resources on the resources of the site, what the pressures are to the sanctuary, the human impacts. We have 17 questions that we have to answer about, biodiversity, water quality, historical resources, and things like that. What are the sanctuary's responses to those pressures? And then in our appendices, we give more detail on what is meant by these questions and how confident we are in the way we're answering them. Some of them we have clear monitoring plans that are addressing exactly what the standard question is that has to be answered at every National Marine Sanctuary. In other cases, we can just interview experts and they'll give us their best insight. So in the status and trend ratings, we do, because we're a big sanctuary, some sites just do one report. If we're answering questions on water quality, to say that it's good at the Davidson Seamount, but it's poor in the Elkhorn Slough, rather than taking an average and saying it's fair, we actually answer these 17 questions in the 4 different areas: the estuary, the nearshore, essentially down to scuba diving depth, offshore, and then the Davidson Seamount area. As I said, they get a different color rating. That's some things that the public and resource managers like. And then we try to give a trending as things are getting better or worse. And then what we're able to do with that is compare the last condition report to the current one. So the last on the left, current one on the right. There are your 17 questions about water, habitat, living resources, and maritime archaeological resources. And then we can compare the two, and you can see the black circles on the left are where things have gotten worse. The estuary rating for eutrophication has gotten worse in the Elkhorn Slough, but then some things get better, like like the levels of human activities that might influence water quality. You can see those are in the blue circles. And then when our national office gets questions from Congress or other representatives or the public, and they say, well, how are the nation's sanctuaries doing? How are the ocean doing? They can make these kinds of comparisons and give some idea of it by comparing all of the sites in this way. How do we obtain the research information that we need? We have some existing staff. As I mentioned, there are 5 of us, and we just know, if somebody calls us up, the media or a resource manager has a question, it's like, well, we've worked on that, we studied that, we can just answer the question. We have an online library in the office, and then through NOAA libraries, and we can do look at our web summaries, like habitat summaries on the Simon website, and answer questions. There's a number of times when I've been called on the phone by the media or somebody, and I'll just click open the website while I'm on the phone, and I'll just be reading off of that, and they think, boy, this guy's got an encyclopedic knowledge, and actually I'm just looking at our Simon website. But anyway, that's one of the ways that we obtain scientific information. As I mentioned, we have our regional experts, 22 members on our research activities panel that are either there at the meetings or happy to take a phone call or an email. Some of our staff, actually all of us, work on some kind of research project, whether it's in the deep sea or in kelp beds, or looking for microplastics. We're all scientists that get to do some research. Get to spend a lot of time convincing colleagues to do research, and I'm hoping that some of the graduate students watching this seminar are thinking, well, I've got some interesting research that I'm doing, but I wonder how it could be tailored to help society a little bit more. And that's some things that we can do, is let you know what kinds of questions we have, or if you're working on a project, how it can be modified to be more useful to the sanctuary. We have a series of research interns and fellows that are funded by NOAA. We can apply for ship time. On the bottom right there, you can see the NOAA ship Shimada. So we tend to get that ship about every other year, and to do offshore operations in areas of the sanctuary that are hard to reach by our smaller boats, the Fulmar and the Tegula. We can also apply for NOAA airplane time, though we haven't gotten that in a while. Actually, NOAA marine operations is actually getting more involved with using drones, and I think there's a big future for using both these plane or helicopter unmanned aerial vehicles for offshore surveys. We spend a lot of time writing grant proposals, like everybody else. Fortunately, we don't have to try to cover our salaries, and then we'll obtain funding any other way we can, selling books, working with our foundation. Some people like to donate, and that's how a team that essentially at this stage has almost no research budget is able to provide scientific information for such a large area that the public is very interested in. Some examples of some of the research projects that our staff are working on. The first one is with just an amazing collaborative team that works on sound to characterize human impacts. We have had some mitigation money from the Navy and had put hydrophones in different sanctuaries in different areas. And Mbari already had their hydrophone at the end of their Mars cable that collects data 24/7, and the Naval Postgraduate School puts out a series of hydrophones and has data from Sur Ridge for, I think, almost 50 years now. And so with that engineering and computational experience, we were able to look at things like, are the sanctuaries relatively quiet? What are some of the rare species? What's going on with the sounds of cruise ships? And we actually were able to detect a decrease in noise in the sanctuary when the pandemic started, and there was less shipping going on offshore. We have, some of us are working on the interpretation of ecological impacts of lost shipping container. And Sydney McDermott, one of the students there at Moss Landing Marine Labs, is working with us on that project. Thousands of these containers that you can see in the top middle of the slide are lost every year. And we've got the only one in the world that we're studying through time to see what happens with it. And whenever containers fall off a boat in Australia or off of Spain or off of Canada, it's likely that that either I or Jim Barry at Embari are going to get a call from the media and say, what's the impacts of these things? We're working on some microplastics characterization. Again, some nice work was done by the Monterey Bay Aquarium and Embari on looking at microplastics with depth. But we did a survey with the Hopkins Marine Station and Cal State Monterey Bay to look at what the microplastics are doing in the surface waters. And somewhat surprisingly and unfortunately, the microplastics that we gathered in the manta tow net there on the upper left are about the same level as average for the world's oceans. So the sanctuary is not doing much to protect us from microplastics at the time. There's a lot of interest in development of offshore wind energy facilities, in particular off of Morro Bay. So we've been providing some background information on what we know about the birds and the seafloor habitat down there. And some of our partners have helped with gathering information on that. We're doing some work on deep sea coral restoration. On the upper right, you can see some of our early work. There's a lot of damage to the deep sea, including with the big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, the Deep Horizon oil spill. And so there's money to do mitigation, but there really aren't that many ideas on how you can restore a habitat in the deep. So we have this area off of off Big Sur, the Sur Ridge, and there's so many corals there that we felt comfortable being able to snip branches off of some of them, half a dozen species, and see if we can translocate them, how they survive, and if they're able to reproduce. And we've had some success, really great success with some species, no success with others. And you probably learn some more about it when the Monterey Bay Aquarium Deep Sea exhibit opens up pretty soon. That's going to be a fun thing to look at. And then, as I mentioned, we're working with Senkus on how to share observatory data or monitoring data that's updated as the data comes in, so we can show status and trends on the kinds of parameters that answer our condition report questions. And then our dive team has worked extensively with PISCO and on a variety of issues, not just in our sanctuary, but our staff is what we're experts on. We're supposed to provide advice to other sites, including we've been doing diving in the Olympic coast, in Channel Islands, and up in the North Coast as well of California. So I thought I'd share with you a few of the kinds of research questions that we have in our management plan right now. See if you're interested in them. If you're looking for a thesis project, if you think your work might be related, these are just a sampling of some of the questions in our management plan, and you can see the website link below it if you want to read through the plan yourself. I find that a lot of scientists don't want to do that. And in fact, I'm trying to develop ways of hooking up scientists with resource managers that have similar interests because the scientists don't want to read the management plans, and the managers don't really have the time or interest in reading the details of scientific papers. So we're going to find a way to match them up through an app or something along those lines. But some of the research questions we're interested in are data science, how to make monitoring data available through what we're calling the Marine Biodiversity Observatory Network. It's a group of people where we have large databases collected by individual labs. But then, how do you put them in the same data format, and where all of the data on the data, the metadata, is in a format that can be put into a database system that NOAA Fisheries uses, and everyone tends to appreciate ERDAP, which then can be served up through a portal at Senkus. And we've already got that working for a whole number of projects, including the Beachcombers Citizen Science Project. But what we really want to do is, for every habitat in the sanctuary, have critical parameters that data is made available through time, so that we can assess the sanctuary in real time rather than every 10 or 15 years with some written report. So in some cases, we're clear on what the critical parameters are, the main things that we want to monitor to answer these questions, but in other cases, we're not so sure. So if you're interested in helping develop monitoring programs for some of these critical parameters, or saying maybe there's a different one that we should be looking at, we're interested in that. One of the priorities for our site is to spend more time characterizing microplastics distribution and abundance. We've sort of had a few snapshots here and there, and that's some things that our office would like to contribute to the national program. As I mentioned, there's a lot of impacts associated with noise. We're working on seal bombs. They can be as many as I think there are as many as over 900 per month in some cases. And what that means for sensitive species like harbor porpoise, which are really sensitive to sound, but they can't leave their areas. They have biogeographic ranges that are pretty tight for their populations. And so what that does for them, if they have to move from these places and they can't feed as effectively, what it does to the seals. Seal bomb is essentially a quarter stick of dynamite that the fishermen will throw in the water to ward off sea lions that are getting near their catches. Some people think that they're dinner bells to bring the sea lions around. Others think they chase them off. Others think that fishermen might be using them to corral the fish before catching them. So there's some work to be done there. There's a lot of interest in ship traffic, not only the noise, but tracking where the ships are, because there's a lot of interest in ship strikes. So when ships run into whales, this doesn't work out too well for the whales. And if we can find out where the ships are traveling and at what speeds, and how that correlates with where the whales are. In the past, we have modified some of the vessel traffic lanes, and that's some things that we're interested in looking into, not just where the lanes are, but the speeds of some of the ships. And then as the wind energy developments occur, it's not just sound. It could be, what are the impacts to the seafloor from the cables, but how will migrating animals get through these things? But what is the sound of some of the activities around the wind energy? And I mean, sound can pick up rain. It can pick up wind itself. It's amazing how much you can learn from that one parameter. We have an ongoing development of our species inventory. I mean, we're supposed to be protecting the resources of the sanctuary and in a sustainable way, but how do you know it's sustainable if you don't really know what's living there? But you can't really measure every single species and detect it out there. There's new techniques using environmental DNA that can help us with that. So we have a couple of projects going on trying to figure out what the inventory is, how much we should look into it, and what's the most effective way to do that. The sanctuaries are really interested in climate change. Exactly how we're going to contribute to the solutions, haven't quite figured out. I know that Scott Hamilton does a lot of work with his students on the impacts of climate to animals, and so that's some things we're interested. Ivano, I guess, couldn't be here today, but he's been a great supporter of understanding what's happening at the dunes. Sandy beaches are the most popular tourist sites in the United States. And if the sand disappeared, a lot of people would be upset. So it'd be good to know where the sand comes from and where it goes. We don't have that for many areas of the coastline. We also in the Monterey Bay historically have the fastest eroding coastline in the state, in the southern Monterey Bay, up to like 6 feet a year. A lot of that might have been associated with the mine operation in Marina, which has stopped harvesting harvesting sand. But we want to know how that is changing, what the budget is, how the sand movements are changing with the closing of the sand mines. And of course, that's of great interest to the hotels and the condominiums down in Sand City and Monterey that have to deal with eroding beaches and managing their properties. We're interested in modeling oceanography, how that relates to prey availability, whale distributions to minimize whale entanglements. I mentioned ship strikes, but there's a lot of interest right now in the crab fishery that puts out a lot of crab pots, and the whales get entangled in them. It's a very interdisciplinary interest, and it's interesting from so many aspects. I mean, when the bottom trawlers left the bay, the crab fishermen took over the areas where they were fishing. I know when the bottom trawlers were there, they'd pull up the trap so that the crab fishermen wouldn't go there. But there's been a big shift in that. There's much less bottom trawling and a lot more crab pots. Right now, many of you are aware of the kelp loss in California. It's sort of miraculously sort of coming back by itself in Northern California with the bull kelp. It's been more patchy around here. There's questions about how's the temperature, some of the warm temperature from the past influencing that. How is that related to the urchin population growth? It's very clearly not just related to sea otter presence or not. And so we have some staff working on those research questions with some scientists in the Bay. And then there's some of the public that really, the dive community really wants to get involved and just remove a bunch of urchins. So we're working with them to turn it into an experiment rather than just people going out and doing their best. If we can manage where the people go to remove the urchins, we can start to learn something about that problem. And then there's always interest in the terrestrial runoff into the coastal ocean. We have an active water quality protection program. It's actually a very different group than the ocean people. There's that are working with agriculture and point source and non-point source runoff. Ross Clark does a lot of work with them to figure out, how you can minimize nutrient input, turbidity, and things like that into the sanctuary. So we have an active water quality protection program that has a lot of questions to be addressed. So for now, though, if you're not interested in reading the management plan, you can just contact me, as some of the students already have from Moss Landing Marine Labs, to talk about applications of your research, or if you're looking for a research project. So that's kind of a list. And now I want to switch into just some things I've been thinking about lately. Our program recently changed its name from a research at the national level, from a research program to a conservation science program. And then now for the public, I think our tab at the top is exploration, because that's what they're interested in. But I've been thinking about, what's the evolution of sort of marine biology conservation, and the beginnings of it were on land. There's a lot of interest in biological conservation on land ahead of the oceans, I think, because people thought the oceans were limitless and there were no problems with it. But Gifford Pinochet he was the first head of the Forest Service. And the thinking at that time, around 1947, was you manage the resources so that there's optimal sustainable consumption for humans, right? That's the way they looked at conservation, is, how can you harvest things you want optimally and continually for humans. Sort of a different way of thinking was around the time of John Muir, and he was interested in protecting things for the benefit of future generations of humans. I mean, not just for consumption, but for mental health and spiritual enrichment. And later on, like 50 years later, in 1901, he started writing about that nature had worth regardless of human benefit. And I was backpacking on the John Muir Trail this summer, and there's certainly something spiritual about backpacking around Yosemite. A little bit later, Aldo Leopold, he talked about how humans, they are greatly influenced by being in wild nature, but they're just plain members of it. They're of the community. They're not masters of it. So we've gone from, how can we manage nature to serve us, to, hey, it's a great thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to serve us. And boy, do I get that question a lot. I'm studying deep sea corals, and people say, well, what good are they? What's the good of a deep sea coral? And I used to try to convince them, that there were things like, potential medication, and they're a canary in the coal mine for looking at ocean acidification. And, I've come to like, look, these things, some of them are 4,000 years old. They're bigger than you are. They have value just of themselves. Rachel Carson in 1951 published The Sea Around Us, and it really became a popular book, teaching people about the oceans and the science associated with it, and it inspired some conservation. A little bit later, Jacques Cousteau, who he inspired a lot of people from my generation to do marine science. He wrote The Silent World, and it kind of went along with his TV show. You used to get this book if you joined the Cousteau Society, and it became a popular book and talked about mostly exploration and inspiring conservation. It was very successful. The funny thing is that it turns out that the silent world, the ocean, is not silent at all. It's actually quite noisy. And some people even think it might have been more noisy when there are more whales out there communicating. Then around, to sort of formalize the concept of marine conservation biology, I mean, there is the Conservation Biology Journal, but Elliot Norse, he's one of the recent people. He founded the Marine Conservation Biology Institute that started to engage scientists. So when in our area there was the Year of the Ocean in 1998, guys like Elliot Norse got thousands of scientists to write letters saying, hey, look, we have this resources that is very important for human food and well-being. It's suffering in many ways, and there needs to be in more engaged public and more funding for science to inform this new field of science. So I think So I went for specifically, sort of what the sanctuary program is, to what some of my research needs are, to sort of, I'm not an expert on sort of the evolution of conservation thinking, but I just thought I'd put it out there because I spoke actually at Katie Lege's and Amanda Kahn's class. It was their scientific writing class, and they had this really interesting discussion on if scientists should be advocates or not. And it got me thinking about this topic. So I thought I'd share it, and maybe some of you can individually think about how you fit in this timeline of marine biological conservation science. And I think I'm going to end there and take a few questions. Thank you for listening, giving me your time. I know time is such a commodity now that is very rare to get people's attention. And then also thank you to all the great collaborators that help us with our science.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Great talk. And we'll open it up for questions now. And just a reminder that you can raise your hand using the reactions tab in the bottom right. Or if you can't find that, you can put it in the chat and I'll ask that. And I got a message from Ivano who just wanted to let you know that he is attending, but he's driving. So and presumably keeping his eyes on the road too. So let's see. We have a question from Amanda Kahn, has her hand raised.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Amanda.
Thank you so much. That was a great talk, as always. I was really struck by you. I didn't know about Aldo Leopold, I think it was Aldo Leopold's statement, or John Muir's statement about sort of the inherent value of nature. And I'm curious because a lot of the time, I also feel like I'm asked, or when I read, to give some sort of monetary value to animals. And there's a lot of kind of the idea of how much economic worth is there in an ecosystem. How do you translate biological things into some kind of value that non-science people would understand? Like, how can we make those numbers or communicate in another way that inherent value?
Oh, the inherent value of it. I know. I have to say that, I have been involved with with some mitigation projects where somebody does damage and then they have to recover that damage. And there are actually some formulas that these economists use, and that they put in numbers like, well, you removed so many of these animals, it would cost so much to restore them. It sounds really precise until you know the information going into it. And then the attorneys at the end say, well, it's just sort of we're doing the best we can guessing, and then we'll see what these people can afford, sort of thing. So, and that depends, you can do better or worse with that based on how much you know about the habitats. But how to give a value to sort of a non-monetary thing. The only thing that comes to mind right now is there's that famous quote by Einstein: you can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that you use to get you into that problem. And so I think we need a new kind of thinking and maybe a new generation of scientists at Moss Landing Marine Labs to help figure out the answer to that one.
Right. Cool, thank you.
Sure.
Karen, did you have a question? I see your yellow. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, Andrew. No, I don't have a question. I have to rush off to another Zoom call, but thank you so much for kicking off our seminar series. That was awesome. And I love that picture in the upper left there showing the transparency of all those different efforts. That's really cool. And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Bye-bye.
And we have a question from Dan Gossard.
Hi, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you helped me through a permitting process where I was going to fly a drone over to map some kelp. So I really appreciate your help with that and hooking me up with Sophie about that. And that's going to be part of my question. First part of the question is I was wondering, and I jumped in a couple minutes after you started, but I was wondering what your thoughts were on regarding kelp restoration and introduction of Pycnopodia as a methodology to help that restoration efforts.
Yeah, I have to say that there's other people in our group that that are working much more carefully on that. Steve Lonhart in particular. My sense of when I used to do diving in Stillwater Cove with the subtitle ecology class was that there really weren't that many Pycnopodia, and it's hard for me to imagine that they could eat that many sea urchins. However, I do know that that Sea Grant is very interested in this question, and they've been funding some projects to look at that. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
I had a question, actually. You talked a lot about engaging stakeholders, like say fishermen, if you are thinking about a new regulation or management decision. What's your strategy for trying to engage a diverse array of stakeholders? And is it something where you open it up for public comment, or you try to set up a dialogue?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that we do that. We try, whenever there's a new, we try to take a lot of ideas from our advisory council, and many people aren't shy about calling us and telling us about their concerns. If we are going to be working on a topic that is going to influence a group of people, we'll make sure to invite them in and try to get them involved with the process. We might, for example, with that essential fish habitat meeting, we thought, well, before we make some sort of decision and announce it, let's talk to some of the leaders in the fishing community. And it was really interesting in the meeting. They came in and we started talking about it, and they said, look, you guys don't know anything about the offshore habitat. You don't know anything about fishing. How are you going to regulate this? But as soon as we showed them our interactive GIS and said, well, let us show you all of the information we do have. And then they'd say, oh, wow, yeah. But did you know this or that? And then we could add their information into it. And in that case, it worked out pretty well in sort of a collaborative effort. But yeah, we try to work through our advisory council. And then for example, with the whale entanglement and crab gear, I mean, that is a huge collaborative effort that our resource protection program is working on with NOAA Fisheries and the fishermen and conservation groups. Yeah, it's definitely an open public process, and which can be really rewarding. But in other times, I think like whenever there's a problem, there's a bunch of angry people. Somebody says, "Hey, the sanctuary should get involved." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go again." Sometimes it works, and sometimes we can help, and other times it's pretty difficult.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. I think Dan's hand is still raised from before.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if I could ask the second part of that
great.
question.
Yeah.
So going back to drones, so there's been some push to use drone mapping for kelp recovery. And I was wondering what the general consensus is on that regarding, sensibility of marine mammals and marine birds and nesting in particular. And if there's a general, consensus that it's going to be a useful methodology that's not going to be too harmful.
Yeah. So, we have people on our advisory council that have sort of said, hey, look, these drones are just ruining the natural wildlife out there. You got to get rid of them. And then we'll have other council members saying, yeah, the drones are the future. That's how we're going to solve all the problems. They don't really have an impact. And so my feeling as a research person is, let's figure some of that stuff out. And so what we've been, for example, with Mbari, they'll get a permit to fly their drone, and then we'll try to work with them to make observations of the animals that they're flying over and looking at the impacts. It could be a species by species thing. It could be where they're located. I think that the sea otters in the Moss Landing Harbor are a lot less sensitive to overflights and sounds than ones on the Big Sur coastline. We have had some people that wanted to look at kelp from drones from UC Santa Cruz, and they wanted to fly off of the Monterey Peninsula, and they got all their permits. And then when they flew, the oyster catcher counting group got really upset because the oyster catcher birds were influenced by the drones. And so by bringing the groups together, our resource protection team did that and had a discussion. They could figure out, okay, here are ways that you can do the mapping without influencing the birds. So my personal feeling is that the future is going to be for drones, and what we need to do is figure out the best way to do it by really understanding what the impacts are. There's interest from a lot of groups, and CSUMB has a big program using drones as well.
And we have a question from Justin Gill. Feel free to go ahead and ask that, Justin.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for your talk. That was amazing. I just had a question about your slide regarding trends in water quality observations. It seemed like it was Bend where you had like scuba depth ranges where that ended at 30 meters, and then you kind of picked it up deeper again.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's studying benthic fishes, I'm really curious about that area between like what we call traditional diving depths and then actual ROV depths. Do you have any observations in between those areas? Like I feel like 30 meters to like 70 or 80 meters is pretty regularly neglected. Are there plans for bringing in like tech or using shallower roaming ROVs or anything like that to pick up that interim area?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. Some people call that depth the lost reefs, because they're not really visited by the divers much, and the big ROVs don't want to go there. So I think there's still a lot to be learned there. I mean, the water quality protection programs, one of the advances that I saw through time was that it used to be that consulting firms were hired on a essentially one outfall by another outfall sort of project, and they combined into this group where they do monitoring regionally through this group called Sea Clean. But I don't know that there's, in terms of water quality, that much work that's been done at that depth, and that's something that we'd be really interested in. I mean, that we do have some beaches that have struggled, where we've had some closed beaches, and in particular off of Santa Cruz, and so there can be water quality problems there, and many times it's just if there's a big flushing event of rain or some sort of sewer breakage, which seems to happen quite often around Pacific Grove, they just close the beaches. It'd be nice if we had some more real-time data on what was happening there to make sure that it was safe for people to swim, rather than just sort of guessing a number of days.
And Mike Foster looks like has a question.
Andrew, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So look, you start out life as a intertidal ecologist. I remember mapping mussel distribution. And now you are in charge of this incredibly complex enterprise. How did you get from there to here?
Well, it's mostly your wisdom, Mike, that got me through it. Oh, yeah, That's an interesting question, because I mostly wanted to work on rocky shores, but I had this general interest in, what is, how can science be used to help manage resources for the next generation. And that's a lot of what the sanctuary does. And we have so many scientists around here that, not only are they outstanding scientists, they're outstanding people. And I'm just interested in just a broad variety of things. And there are many people that are interested in helping and sharing in this effort. So I enjoy it. I have to say that one of the things I do enjoy that's a little different is that I didn't always like getting into the real fine details of the research projects. And in this way, I can sort of be at a higher level understanding of a lot of them and help get projects started, get them funded, put the teams together, but not really have to do all of the statistical analyses and things like that.
Well, great. Looks like you're doing a great job.
Thanks, Mike.
We have a question from Jason.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for coming to talk to us today. It's good to hear your voice again. I was
Jason.
curious, towards the beginning of your talk, you were talking about the different national marine sanctuaries across the country. And in terms of every ecosystem being a little bit different, how often do management strategies and applicability of other strategies and other marine sanctuaries apply to your marine sanctuary? So how often does that collaboration exist?
Yeah, these sanctuaries are so different. I mean, we even have some in freshwater. We have one off Georgia that's kind of a square mile of reef surrounded by a lot of sand, and just very different than us. The big difference, I think, between the sites is how much coastline you have, because the human influence is great. Everything coming off the coast. If you have a sanctuary that's way offshore, you're going to have a lot fewer management issues to deal with. But we do have similarities in a lot of things, like sound, for instance. We work together on that. There's a number of groups that are interested in deep sea corals. There's a number of sites that have kelp issues, but they don't quite have a dive program like we do. So we are able to work across sites quite a bit, because we don't have enough to do at ours. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Well, I know Andrew has to get off and go teach a class in a little bit, so he won't be able to stick around, but he did welcome all of us, especially the students, to get in touch with him over email if you want to follow up with him on any ideas or questions. So let's thank Andrew and give him a virtual round of applause. Thank you for kicking off our seminar series.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.